Hello, my name is Claire Morgan, and for most of my life, I was the daughter no one saw living in the shadow of a sister my parents treated like gold. I thought I had finally built freedom for myself in Chicago until my father called with a threat. If I refused to attend Brielle's wedding, he'd cut off my tuition. That moment pulled me back into a family power game I never asked to play, but one I was finally ready to confront on my own terms. If this kind of story resonates with you, please share, and subscribe. Your support helps us keep telling the stories that matter. Let's begin. My tuition ends the second you refuse to attend Brielle's wedding. My father's voice was a hammer on the phone. The words struck so hard they vibrated through the glass wall of my Chicago apartment, rattling against the calm surface of Lake Michigan beyond. He never asked about my life, never once cared to know if I was managing fine on my own. Every call was a weapon. Every sentence a trans. I remembered the time he boasted to our neighbors that he was paying my way, puffed with pride as though my education were stamped with his signature. In reality, scholarships had carried me. Tutoring sessions stacked until dawn had filled the gaps. Gerald Morgan never paid for more than his ego. Yet his voice now carried the same hoe. I let the silence hang until he repeated himself. I ended the call without a goodbye, the screen still glowing in my palm. Around me, the apartment was my rebuttal. Clean lines, steel fixtures. Shelves lined with books I had chosen, a sanctuary no one had built for me. I scrolled through flights to the Midwest, my finger hovering above first class. Attending WW. The small town hadn't changed. Cracked sidewalks, tired storefronts, and the Morgan house dressed for spectacle. Ribbons hung from porch rails, vans unloading floral arrangements clogged the street. Inside, the air smelled of candles and adhesive. My mother, clipboard in hand, looked through me as if I were a courier. "You made it," she said, already turning back to her list. She shoved a basket into my hands, her manicured nails brushing mine like an afterthought. "These need ribbons by 4. No greeting, no warmth, just work." By evening, I was still trimming silk when my father appeared. "Good, you're settled," he said. He waved a chart like a general. "Linens need steaming, Brielle wants eyes on the table layout." Settled. As if I had been absorbed into the machinery of their perfection. Then Brielle arrived, her voice echoing before she stepped into view. Cascading, not gathered. "Do I have to do everything myself?" She swept in, draped in chiffon perfume, trailing like a flag. She kissed the air near my cheek. "Finally." "The caterer's useless, the florist can't listen. This wedding might kill me." She didn't pause to ask about my life. To her, I was just another pair of hands. Dinner was staged like theater. The table glittered under a chandelier, silver polished, until it reflected back every false smile. Ethan entered with a grin designed for photographs, a bottle of red in his hand. He clasped my father's shoulder, charmed my mother with a compliment, and leaned toward Brielle like she was royalty. "So, this is Claire," he said, eyes sharp, lips curved. "The quiet one." He spoke in sweeping phrases, filling the room with talk of crypto markets in Zurich, pipelines to Singapore investors with yachts in the Adriatic. My family drank every word. My father nodded gravely. My mother glowed, Brielle all but sparkled. When I asked him specifics, protocols, security models, he faltered just a blink too long before covering it with a smile. They didn't notice. They never did. Later, searching for a pen, I stepped into my father's study. The room smelled of leather and dust, filled with unread books and framed certificates that proved nothing. Papers lay neatly arranged across the desk. My eyes caught a header, Home Equity Loan Refinance Agreement. The house nearly free after decades bound again by debt. In the margin, his handwriting, per Ethan's recommendation, 20% return by Q2. My pulse thudded as I traced the lines. Then I noticed another page, a side document with Ethan's name scrawled bold and confident. My lips tightened, words spilling into the quiet like smoke. "What are you really after?" Claire opens her laptop at midnight, the glow reflected in her steady eyes. "Let's see who Ethan Cross really is." The apartment guest room was quiet except for the faint hum of crickets beyond the window. My suitcase sat unopened by the bed, half symbolic, half practical, because part of me already expected this visit to implode. The screen lit up my face as I pulled up databases, registries, and archived news. His name yielded glossy LinkedIn profiles, staged photographs all too recent to be authentic. Cross appeared only in the last 2 years. Before that, nothing but shadows. Memories pressed in while I typed. Ninth grade science fair, the ribbon bright blue against my palm. I'd stood waiting, proud, certain that moment would matter. My parents never came. They were across town cheering Brielle for a single soccer goal, posting pictures as though she'd won a championship. That was the day I stopped expecting recognition. Tonight, with my fingers moving fast across the keyboard, I realized their blindness might cost them far more than my disappointment. Aliases emerged. Evan Lewis, Edward Lambert, Ethan Cross. Same face in different cities, each identity dissolving after a short blaze of charm. I documented timelines matching sudden financial collapses with his departures. Each pattern drew a knot in my stomach tighter. This wasn't coincidence, it was choreography. By morning, the backyard buzzed with laughter forced through tension. Relatives admired floral arches while whispers passed too quickly between them. Aunt Diane leaned toward me by the roses, her gloves dotted with soil. "He's hiding something?" She murmured, eyes fixed on my father, pacing nearby. "Your dad refinanced the house." "Didn't tell Linda. I saw the papers." My pulse quickened, but I only nodded. Confirmation of what I'd already suspected sharpened the blade. Later, I drove to a cafe near the town square. Across from me sat Karen Delaney, shoulders stiff, eyes rimmed with exhaustion, older than her age. She slid a worn folder across the table, then a small USB. "He was Edward when I knew him," she whispered. Photographs showed the same man, hairstyled suit, impeccable smile, identical. Bank statements drained of thousands emails promising returns, even an engagement invitation that had never led to vows. He vanished 3 days before the wedding. Left me in debt. Left my parents ashamed. Her hand shook as she lifted her coffee. "Don't let it happen again." I gripped the USB like a weapon. He chose the wrong family this time. Evening returned me to the Morgan dining room. I laid preliminary files on the table, photographs, cached profiles, timelines. "Look at this. He's not Ethan Cross. He's played this game before." My father's face reddened as he stood slamming his fist against the wood. "Enough you've always been jealous of your sister." The words cut deeper than I expected, though I'd braced myself. Brielle's mascara smudged as she burst into tears, clinging to Ethan's imagined innocence. Linda stared at the carpet lips, pressed thin silence, her only defense. I gathered the papers, calmly slid them back into my bag, and walked to the door. My suitcase handle felt cold in my grip. I paused on the porch, the night air cool against my face, the house humming with denial behind me. My voice carried steady, sharpened by resolve. "If they won't listen, the whole town will." Vivian Scott leans across the desk. "If we want him to trip, we need a prenup he can't afford to sign." Her tone carried the same sharp edge that had guided me through my first year as an analyst, back when I was still learning how to navigate corporate fraud. Now she was here, sleeves rolled, eyes alive with strategy sketching clauses on yellow legal paper as though drafting blueprints for war. I nodded, pulse steady, because for the first time in days, the weight pressing on my chest began to feel like armor rather than chains. She reminded me that my father's threats about tuition had always been smoke. I had paid my own way, piecing together scholarships, tutoring shifts, research stipends. They claimed generosity while I carried the grind alone. That survival was proof enough I didn't need their support to expose the truth, and Vivian knew how to weaponize that truth into something undeniable. We worked through the morning drafting language that tied Ethan's promises to verifiable disclosure. A prenup disguised as a trust document, perfect bait for someone who thrived on illusions. "He'll balk," Vivian said, sliding the papers into a crisp folder. "Because signing it means transparency, and predators avoid daylight." By noon, I forwarded flagged information to the local bank's compliance department. My hands barely shook as I typed, attaching timelines, identity discrepancies, and Karen Delaney's corroborating records. Every email was another thread woven into a net, one he wouldn't see tightening until too late. When the confirmation ping arrived in my inbox file, received case under review, I allowed myself the briefest smile. The first domino had tipped. Back at the Morgan estate, preparations for the rehearsal dinner filled the ballroom with noise and frantic energy. White linen swans perched atop tables, waitstaff rehearsed serving lines, and Brielle floated through it all like a crowned queen. Aunt Diane adjusted cables for the projector, her hands steady despite the chaos. She caught my gaze across the room and gave a small nod, our silent pact that the reveal would be ready. Ethan, of course, basked in the center. His laugh boomed over the string quartet rehearsing in the corner, his hand sweeping through the air as he spun tales of global investors and yacht meetings in the Adriatic. Each boast was larger than the last, and my father clung to every word, pride swelling with each exaggerated detail. Brielle's adoration glowed like stage lighting, blinding her from the cracks widening beneath her fiancé's performance. I lingered near the edge, every observation catalogued, every careless phrase stored. He thrived on attention, unaware that the same appetite would drive him straight into the snare. My phone buzzed against my palm. One glance at the screen's suspicious activity hold confirmed, and my breath caught. The account freeze was in motion. His empire of smoke and mirrors had just lost its hidden scaffolding. I slipped the phone back into my clutch heart, racing not with fear, but with anticipation. The timing was perfect. 2 days until the wedding, one evening until the rehearsal dinner spectacle. The ballroom lights flickered as technicians adjusted the dimmers, plunging the chandeliers into momentary shadow. Across the polished floor, Ethan strode in tuxedo, sharp grin polished every inch the prince my family wanted him to be. I leaned close to Diane, whispering low, steady, almost like a prayer. Showtime. The ballroom lights glimmered across crystal glasses, but Claire's laptop on the corner table held sharper light. The truth. Music from the quartet floated under chandeliers, laughter rose around champagne flutes, and the scent of roses curled through the air, but her attention never wavered. Every keystroke was a blade honed for this moment. Showtime had arrived. Ethan stood at the head table with Brielle's hand looped through his arm, his tuxedo fitted like armor, his smile rehearsed down to the angle of his jaw. He raised a glass and launched into another story about global markets, Dubai investors, and blockchain opportunities that apparently only he could access. Guests leaned forward dazzled. Gerald puffed his chest. Linda beamed at the applause, and Brielle sparkled beside him, radiant in her ignorance. Claire's lips barely moved, yet her voice cut across the room. Enough fairy tales. The projector hummed alive the screen behind Ethan, shifting from floral backdrops to stark images. Engagement announcements, police reports, bankruptcy filings. One photo after another. Ethan with different names. Ethan in other towns. Ethan leaving trails of ruin. Gasps sliced through the music. Chairs scraped. A journalist's pen raced furiously. That's slander. Ethan barked, mask slipping. She's jealous, desperate for attention. His hand gestured wildly, but sweat began to bead at his temple. Brielle's grip on his arm faltered. Gerald's jaw hardened, but uncertainty flickered in his eyes as the screen displayed Karen Delaney's testimony, her voice trembling through speakers. He took everything and vanished before our wedding day. Vivian rose from her chair, calm and deliberate, documents in hand. Then prove her wrong. Sign this prenup. Disclose your assets. If you are who you claim, transparency should be effortless. The paper slid across polished oak toward him. Ethan recoiled, lips curling, eyes darting. His charm evaporated under the weight of silence pressing in from every side. Gerald's phone buzzed. He glanced down and the color drained from his face. Bank alert, suspicious activity hold. His hand trembled as he tried to hide the screen, but whispers already rippled across the room. Linda's painted smile collapsed, frozen in shock. Brielle's wine glass slipped from her hand, shattering on the marble floor with a piercing crack that seemed to echo longer than any applause Ethan had ever stolen. The air turned electric heavy with the sound of whispered names and muffled disbelief. Ethan's shoulders sagged, his polished exterior fractured. He attempted one final grin, but it contorted into something desperate. The mask was gone, and beneath it was only panic. He pushed through the crowd, ignoring Brielle's quivering voice, ignoring Gerald's barked demands. Cameras flashed as he stormed from the ballroom. Reporters scribbled frantically. Relatives murmured, and the string quartet faltered to a halt. Claire, steady as stone, reached forward and shut her laptop. The click rang louder than the broken glass at her sister's feet. Now let's see how fast he runs. By morning, Ethan was gone, leaving behind empty accounts and a family wreckage. The Morgan house, once draped in white ribbons and floral arches, now sagged with silence. Creditors rang the phone until its shrill tone became another form of punishment. The air carried the sharp scent of wilted roses dumped unceremoniously into trash bins. Gerald barked orders. No one followed his face. Red veins raised at his temples. He tore through envelopes, bank statements, spilling across the dining table. Each one was a blade joint, accounts, drained wedding deposits, vanished mortgage balance suddenly swollen to a number that made his hands shake. He slammed a fist against the wood, roaring that this wasn't possible, that banks made mistakes that Ethan would explain. Linda sat on the sofa, pale and hollow-eyed, clutching her laptop as though the numbers on the retirement portal would rearrange themselves if she stared hard enough. But the balance glared back at her 0. Tears welled, smudging her mascara into gray shadows. It was everything she whispered. All of it. Gone. Upstairs, Brielle's sobs leaked through the ceiling, a jagged lullaby of denial. She hadn't left her room since Ethan fled, her wedding gown hanging limp in the hallway like a ghost mocking the dream she clung to. Claire stood in the doorway, arms folded, expression unreadable. She didn't raise her voice. She didn't need to. Her presence alone unsettled Gerald, who looked at her as if she were the executioner holding the verdict. Diane hovered by the fireplace, silent, watchful, a steady presence amid the chaos. The front door creaked open, and Vivian entered, her heels clicking with deliberate rhythm. She carried a slim folder under one arm. Claire met her gaze, then stepped forward. "You want this house saved? You want to avoid losing everything in court? Then you'll do it on my terms." Gerald sneered, spittle catching on his lip. "You think you hold the power here? You're nothing without us." "Don't forget who paid your way." Claire's laugh was sharp, humorless. "You didn't pay my way. Scholarships did. I survived without you then. I can survive without you now." She opened Vivian's folder and slid a document across the table. "But you can't survive this without me. Sign." Linda leaned forward, hands trembling as she scanned the words. Her lips parted, voice breaking. We acknowledge the favoritism, the neglect, the way we chose Brielle over Claire." She covered her mouth, eyes wet, but she kept reading. Gerald's fist slammed the table again. "I will not sign this farce. She manipulated us." No, Linda cut in, voice trembling but stronger than before. "She's right." The room froze. Linda pressed a hand to her chest. "Do you know why I saw it? Because it was done to me. My parents worshipped my sister. I swore I'd never repeat it. But I did. I made Claire invisible just like I was." Silence fell heavy and raw. Gerald blinked, caught off guard by the crack in his wife's armor. For the first time, his authority faltered. Claire's eyes softened for a fleeting second, but she quickly gathered the papers and pushed a pen toward them. "Sign it, both of you, or lose everything." Linda reached first, scrawling her name in shaky ink. She slid the pen across. Gerald's chest heaved as if every breath was war. His pride battled the reality, screaming from every bank alert and every vendor's demand for repayment. At last, with a guttural sound, he grabbed the pen and scrawled his name, the strokes jagged and angry. Claire tucked the signed statement into her briefcase, the click of its clasp final and absolute. She rose, towering not by height, but by control reclaimed. Her gaze locked on Gerald's, cold and steady. "From now on, you live under my terms." Weeks later, Claire stood under bright auditorium lights, not as the invisible daughter, but as a recognized woman. The City Hall chamber was full, the seal of Chicago gleaming on the podium, and the murmur of the crowd hushed as her name was read aloud. Applause swelled, genuine and uncoerced, the kind of acknowledgement she had once thought impossible. She stepped forward, steady the award cool in her hands, the moment burning warmer than any cheer her family had ever spared. Her words carried clear across the room. She spoke not of her family's betrayal, nor the wreckage Ethan left behind, but of the countless invisible children who grew up unseen. She announced the Visibility Grant, a fund dedicated to giving overlooked students the tools she once had to fight for alone. The crowd rose again, the sound of clapping echoing like thunder, and Claire felt the circle complete. Her whispered vow: if they won't listen, the whole town will have manifested into something permanent. Reporters scribbled notes about Ethan, now officially listed as a fugitive under federal investigation. More victims had come forward, their stories threading together into a net that law enforcement could no longer ignore. Headlines paired his name with fraud and theft, not glamour. And somewhere in the Midwest, Gerald and Linda sat in the ruins of their reputation, whispers following them through grocery aisles and church pews. Brielle hid from cameras, mourning the illusion she had built her life upon. After the ceremony, Diane hugged her tightly, her voice cracking with pride. "You've done more than any of us dreamed." Then, almost shyly, she confessed a secret she had carried for years: how she had quietly sent money to the bursar's office when Claire's scholarship funds came late, how she had left anonymous deposits to keep her afloat. "I couldn't stand by and watch them crush you," she said. The revelation broke through Claire's steel exterior, tears welling unbidden as she realized she had not been as alone as she thought. Later that night, back in her Chicago apartment, the city stretched out beneath her windows, every light a reflection of possibility. She set the award on her desk next to her laptop and let the silence wash over her. Then the soft ping of her inbox drew her forward. It was an email from Brielle. Short, hesitant. She had given birth to a baby girl. She wanted Claire to meet her niece. Claire closed her eyes, letting the weight of the message settle. The offer was a thread, fragile, maybe breakable, but undeniably there. Family had failed her, yet here was the faintest hint of repair. She walked to the window, the skyline glowing like a promise. Her reflection stared back stronger, sharper, unashamed. She whispered to her reflection, "I chose freedom, and I don't regret it." Betrayal once silenced her, but in the end, the truth roared louder than every lie. The man who wore borrowed names was unmasked, and the family who cast her aside was forced to confront their own reflection in the wreckage he left. When injustice is met with unwavering courage, the final verdict can echo through a lifetime, reminding us that no wall of deceit can stand against the tide of truth. Sometimes it only takes one voice refusing to stay invisible to change the balance forever. Like, share, subscribe, and leave your thoughts below. Comment 1 if this story resonates with you.